grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lads. There's a small bit of a needle there. Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen victory, and now they're really roaring. And I can tell you, that there won't be a cow milk from County Clare for at least a week.
I think the best thing about the Allianz League is that it's impossible to call the games on any given weekend. And it's true that, like in every competition, in every sport, there are blowouts. You look at Cork putting 6 goals past Limerick at the weekend, but every week there are also results that are shocks, either because of who wins or because of the way that they win. So, for example, this weekend, the unexpected included Mayo's demolition of Tyrone in Division 1, Clare almost beating Dublin in Division 2, and Wicklow going down to Laois and giving the Division 4 leaders a deserved beating. It means that every division in the league is now beautifully poised. And today on the Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show, in partnership with Allianz, we're going to be looking at promotion and relegation in every division. And we'll also be looking at other things that are happening, including the giant GAA rumour factory that continues at full bore week after week. My name is Paul Rouse, and I'm joined by the former Mayo footballer and manager, James Horan, by the former Donegal footballer and under-20 coach, Eamon McGee, and by Maurice Brosnan of the Irish Examiner. You're very welcome, lads. The league is going on, and we're already 4 weeks in, and it has now taken a fairly serious shape. Eamon, are you confident Donegal are going to be safe?
No, I'm not confident. I went out to watch them yesterday. Now, great day for it there in O'Donnell Park, and it was despite what some people thought, I thought it was a good game. I enjoyed the game now, but if you asked me before, give me a percentage chance of them coming out with a result, I'd have put it about 30-40%, but it wasn't beyond the realms, and it's the same for them staying up. It's not beyond the realms of possibilities that they stay up, but it's gonna be a tough one to go looking for the results and the places that they have to go looking. When you go to these games now, are you still missing playing, or are you going for a different reason? Why are you going? Why did you go to that match? I'm definitely a supporter now. I think with Neil and Murphy, Paddy's there, but Murphy and Neil I would have a close connection with them in terms of from the playing days, and so there was loyalty to them there. Even when I got into the media, I refused to go after them when they probably had a weak chance to have a few pops at the setup now. But I'm separated from them. I'm just in that supporter mode now. So the lads better watch out, or I'll have a few. Yeah. The gloves are off at this point. James, did you go to Castlebar?
I watched it live. I'm about 1.5 miles out the road, but didn't go to it. There was just some family stuff going on, so it was easier for us to sit down and watch it. But some game.
Did you see that coming? Did you see it coming?
Well, I suppose it's Mayo are very consistent. This league, they're their conditioning and their play and their run on top of the ground and injury free, and just it's all everything's lined up really well, and they're playing well. And Tyrone, I would say, are the opposite. Fits and starts, you're not quite sure what you were going to get. And it's funny, like for the first 15-20 minutes, Tyrone were pretty decent, I would say. A couple of points up, and we're attacking, and until Jim O'Connor stretched up his long arm and got a ball, and next thing it completely started the game change. And I suppose when pressure came on, this is always, and I don't know, it'd be interesting in Eamon's point of view on this, but when pressure came on, when there's a disgruntled team or a team that aren't maybe all pulling the same way, when pressure comes on and a team gets a run on you, like Mayo did, I just think the wheels came off, for Tyrone, and Mayo devastated them. And I think, you can see examples, and sometimes, one example is enough for it to give you an indication of maybe what the mood in the camp is. And I just think, Enda Hession got a brilliant goal, and I'm sure Niall Morgan will be getting a slagging for a long time after buying that dummy, but got a fabulous goal. But in the lead up to that, that goal. Conor Myler, who's a brilliant player, and with 2 or 3 others had Enda Hessian closed off.
Yeah, they had him wrapped,
sealed up. It was fairly, he was coming in a pace and all that kind of stuff. But good defenders, that's easy stuff. Keep him out there at worst a point. But he waltzed through them, and there was 1 or 2 pretend tackles. That's all you could really call it, I would say. And sort of a heartless tackle that their spirit wasn't there almost, And he waltzed through, and Ryan O'Donoghue flicked it back to him and kicked it into the net. That's so untypical of what you'd expect from Tyrone. Usually, when you go in there just outside the D, it's a war zone, and you get nothing easy. But they were just so out of sorts with who they are, I suppose, and Mayo just with strength and power and no shortage of good play just demolished them.
You say it's untypical, James, and it is untypical, but it wasn't alone. It wasn't the only time that happened, because I think an even stronger example is Diarmuid O'Connor's goal at the end, where he ran through. There's 8 defenders outside him. Lads don't leave. They're minding their own men rather than going.
Yeah, it's a symptom of something else that's going on. It definitely is, because that's the point I'm sort of making about the Conor Myler and that situation. That one as well. Again, yeah, you're right. Another good example. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that at inter-county level. I don't know. One of the guys might have seen it, but to see a goal like that, where you saw the guys backing off, and a defender will see where the risk is. A good defender, where's the risk? Right, the risk is here. I'm going in to nail whatever it is, but they didn't do that. And just he ran. He took that. Well, he took it from outside their half and just waltzed through 1-2 with Jordan Flynn and kicked it into the net. And Tyrone guys turned around and walked away. So it's very, very unusual, I suppose. So look, you can look into it various ways, but I suppose in the experience I've had where you're involved in teams and that sort of performance comes out, there's something just not lined up, and you get performances and inconsistencies like that.
I might be reading too much into it now, but I thought, just to follow up on James's point there, I thought the camera panned to Fergal Logan and Duher at the very end, and they just looked like 2 men that were just perplexed, thinking, what are we doing wrong here?
Shell shock.
Yeah. I think it was shell shock, and again, I might be reading into it too much, but it just looked like they had the weight of the world on their shoulders there, and they were just at an impasse in terms of where do we go from here. Now, think back to the Kerry results where they actually went on to win the All Ireland, and we all wrote them off that year. Like, if they can go out and turn it around, but when you go back to that goal, the Hessian goal, like we all like to take clips out, and this is great defending, but a thing I like to do is show someone poor defending, and like in terms of that wanton desire that you associate with Tyrone and you associate with good defending, that in terms of there's a price to be paid if you're going to get that shot. If you're going to get in for goal or you're going to get in for a point, there's a price to be paid. And Myler, who so much energy, he just they just let it happen.
If you were in that dressing room after the game, and we'll look at it in different levels, you're a player in that defense. What would you say in that dressing room after the game, or in training on Tuesday night if you decided to wait that long?
No, I have been in dressing rooms like that there. I think James will think back to 2013 where the floodgates opened on us. I think in
the quarterfinal.
In the quarterfinals, and that's exactly, we weren't going 100% that year, and Mayo were flying, and they exposed the chink, and it just everything fell to pieces. There's not a lot you can say in terms of the defense. You have to be wary of the fact that probably a lot of them defenders are just not at the level, and it all comes back. The only way you can set up in the dressing room is if you look in the mirror and say, like, am I going 100%? And then you can go to someone else. But until you do, I think you've got to stay quiet. And there's very few in that Tyrone dressing room at the minute that are, going
that are really on it. Yeah.
That are operating in a full tilt, that can stand up in the middle of the dressing room and say, you're not at the level, you're cheating. And I don't think there's anybody in that Tyrone dressing room can say that.
What would you do, James? As manager, you walk into that dressing room after the game. Are you having it out there and then, or are you waiting until Tuesday night?
I don't know if there's any benefit to having it out there and then. I don't know. You know, there'll be heads down, there'll be stuff, and it could turn into a riot, or it could, you know, there'll be people storming off. And is there any benefit that long term? You have a game next weekend. You know, back to, you know, you have a game next weekend. Yeah. So how do you? So look, what I do in that situation, I'd probably get out of there, get food in, get the recovery, and the next day I'd be on to probably maybe 4 or 5 of the real true leaders in the group, and get them at training on Tuesday night to role model the behaviours that make us the team we are, you know, at a basic level. So I mean, if you know, say if it's a fullback, centre half back, midfielder and centre or whatever, that they lead by action, you know, that they set a tone, they set a, you know, out on the field, as I said, they role model, and then, you know, typically you get straight into maybe a 20-minute game, first thing you train, and get a bit of warm, we get into a game and create the conditions for narrow the pitch, shorten the pitch or something.
Are you looking for a row, James?
Basic level.
Are you looking for a row?
Nah, not a row, but just you know, if you asked me about the Tyrone game, so they were so off, there was no real contact, there was no. So it's getting that energy going. So creating the situation where you get that energy going, and then maybe after a 10 or 15 minute where there's real high volume, right? How do we? You know, you can start to get into something then with the players. But I don't know if you start roaring and shouting. You know, there's only a couple of times probably in the season where there's a time for righteous anger, if you want to call it that. You know, if you're roaring and shouting too much, you know, players, you know, if you roar and shout at Eamon McGee too much. Is Eamon McGee going to listen to you anyway? But is he going to listen to you? You know, if you're at that,
there's turns of noise. There's turns of noise. You need to be able to press the button at certain times in the season, and you know, if you're doing it consistently week in week out, it just turns into noise. And I actually had this conversation with Murphy one year, might have been 2013, but it was one year we weren't going. We could see the signs. And I says to Murphy, I says, we're going to have a meeting about this here. It might have been after a league game or something. And he says, no, we don't. There's no point talking about it. You got to do it in the training field. And that's where it has to happen. You know, you have to consistently do whatever you do on the Sunday or the Saturday. You've got to do it on the training ground. And then you can start talking it.
Where were you, Maurice? What game were you at?
I was at the Galway Limerick hurling game yesterday, so I watched this game back yesterday. I do think like this conversation is really interesting for a couple of reasons though, Paul, because sometimes this gets bracketed in the bog standard cliche of intensity, and you know there was no intensity there today, and then it's back the next week. And the reality is like that is obviously a nonsense, but there's a genuine difference between teams. I look at teams who are maybe not moving as well in the league, and you can kind of put them in two brackets. There are teams who just tactically are working through stuff. So they're definitely for me in that bracket. I think Cork are in that bracket. Monaghan are in that bracket. And there's other teams which have an attitude issue right now. The two that are glaring for me are Kildare and Tyrone. And that is, you know, I don't know if any of you watched the Kildare game at the weekend, but
yeah, I watched it.
Like the first 20 minutes, Michael Murphy is on commentary, who's a brilliant pundit and a very short reader of the game, and he's lauding Kildare setup. You know, he's saying they've got 2 left out the back, they've got good stretch. Kevin Feely's hopping off Brendan Rodgers. I think they're only a point down at that stage, and then you know Darren Curran kicks a really bad wide. They kick another bad wide. They can see the goal, and it is just it's like light and day. And I was actually thinking about this because of what James said last week. James, you made the point about. I was talking about Kerry's conditioning a lot in Castlebar on Saturday, and they looked like there was a gap between the fitness of both teams. And you made the point at the time about attitude. Now, I don't think Kerry were any fitter last weekend than they were on Saturday in Castlebar, but the difference in their attitude was tenfold. And when I say attitude, I don't, you know, there's metrics for work rate. Like you can get your GPS up high, you can even your tackles might be high, but there is a genuine attitude where we're not going to let a guy through here. We're just that kind of thing, which is a very hard thing to define. But I think that's lacking in certain teams. And actually, the reason I bring that up, like Eamon, I wonder, would you rather be a team who has an issue with attitude or a tactical issue right now? Like I bring this game up to you, I say every time I talk to you, but I just find it so interesting that the 2010 the Crossmaglen game against the Armagh game, like I remember at the time I asked you about
this Donegal Armagh in Crossmaglen in 2010.
Donegal played Armagh in 2010, and it didn't go well for Donegal. It was Jamie Clark's announcement, basically. I think he had 2 goals in the first 10 minutes, and it kind of slid from there. And I don't want to put words in your mouth now, Eamon, but I think at the time you said, you thought maybe that team was mentally weak, not in the way that term is thrown about, willy-nilly, but in terms of they'd actually, like, mental strength is a skill. It's a genuine skill. There's tools that you need at your disposal to be able to channel that. And that team, for whatever reason, attitude was off then. So presumably you could actually, like Tyrone or Kildare, they could flick a switch. Like, presumably you could get that right in a week if you could nail the attitude problem. Whereas the flip side is that maybe a tactics thing takes longer. So maybe you would rather be, as bad as it looks, maybe you would rather be a Tyrone or a Kildare today than a different team who have a lot more to iron out in terms of system and structure.
I think Tyrone, they're in a spot where they can turn it around. They've been there, they've had their backs to the wall, people have doubted them. Go back to that Kerry game, I don't think any of us were shrewd enough to be able to see that turnaround there. They go on to won the All-Ireland that year, and they have it there. It's somewhere. I don't know will they find it this season, but they have it somewhere, in terms of that attitude where they can go back to being that hungry, intensive team. And sorry for using that word, intensive. I know it's thrown about nowadays, but they have it there somewhere. I don't know enough about Kildare to say it's there, but it's just about finding that wee bit of desire again.
Well, is it just on that? It's an interesting point. Is it Tyrone need that to generate that cause again? That there's such a bad defeat. People on podcasts writing them off. That they don't care, that they won't tackle, that they're gone soft. That I'd say there's no one better than to use that as some sort of a rallying call almost. I just think that's possible. You're 100% right. That's possible with Tyrone above anyone. I don't think it's the same situation whatsoever with Kildare, but there's a huge clawback needed from Tyrone really rapidly in an awful short space of time in a short season. I just can't see. I think they're too far off even for that rally that they could do, because they've great players. You saw the 2 Canavans playing, and Kieran coming on. There's a lot of good stuff there, but there's too many things in the mix for it to be almost right for championship, I think. But just when you mentioned Kildare, it's a tough spot they're in now. Really,
they have a big game. They have a big game next weekend against Louth, who people wouldn't have fancied to beat Meath. They turn over Meath, and if Louth beat Kildare next Sunday, there's every chance Louth are staying in Division 2, and Kildare are in absolute peril at that point.
Yeah, absolutely, and after that, like let's be honest, Derry were at a different level, different level of operation. So that just is hard to deal with and turn around into in a week as well. For Kildare to come out and get it right. Now again, it's always the case with Kildare. You look through a lot of the players that they have. You just look through, that checking on paper, and a lot of players do. You check a team, or when a team's announced or whatever, you just get a feel for the capability of a team. I'd say, when you look at it, you always feel there's really capable players in Kildare on that Kildare team. You could ream off a number of them from forward to backwards that are. That if they got it together, that they'd be very, very capable. But there's just an inconsistency there that you just don't know what you're going to get. And look at knowing Glenn Ryan, you can be sure that's exactly what he's looking for. You know, you go back to him when he was centre half back, and God help you if you went into his territory. Really, really strong player who no doubt is looking for that consistency, looking for that determination.
There's a problem though, isn't there? Isn't that the nub of the problem for Kildare? We keep talking about Kildare's potential, but the one thing we know about potential is that it's something that doesn't exist in any tangible way. And if a team keeps falling short on its potential, well, then maybe they just aren't really that good.
Yeah. I think it's a fair point.
I say that as a question as well, though, because maybe there is something there. It's not easy to see it as things stand.
Well, go back to the Donegal team of the Naughties. I know the potential was there. It was a term that was bandied at us. And then people just got fed up and they said exactly what you says. But there's no point us getting our hopes up about Donegal because they're going to let you down. And it culminated in the Armagh and Jim coming in and trying to tap into that potential. But I think potential and, you know, go back to Maurice's point, mental weakness or whatever way you want to term it are closely linked. You know, there's lots of players with potential, but have they the strength to push on and fulfill that? There's lots of teams in the same bracket. So probably it's there somewhere. It's there somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's case unproven. I think we'll have to see. And if you think about it, I think they got out of jail against Clare the previous weekend. I think we maybe thought, okay, they've turned the corner here. But I think last weekend on Sunday is a huge step backwards for Kildare. I think that's the kind of game. It's one thing to lose it, but it's another thing to lose by almost a point a man at home. In a key match for your season. I think if Tyrone are a long way off it, then Kildare are in Tyrone's rear windows at this stage. I want to talk about Eamon. I want to talk about Donegal for a second. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of thinking about how to ask this question of you, and I'm not sure exactly how to ask it, if truth be told. But
just go back to my first point. Most ties are cut with the team now, so feel free to ask any question.
So the basic thing about it is, even before the league had started, the rumor mill was full bore about Donegal. It's not a happy camp. Michael Murphy, fair enough, stepped away. His time, you know, he's moved on, and around that, then stories start going. The camp's not going well. Training's not going well. Other lads have drifted out, and the rumor mill has it that Donegal are going to struggle to win a match in the league, and there's certainties for relegation. Do you hear those rumors?
Oh, definitely. I heard those.
Is there substance to them?
No, there's not. You know, I think people are, especially with the Murphy thing. Murphy had, you know, before Paddy Carroll was even announced, he met the Neil McGee and Neil Gallagher for a few pints down in Eudora, and he told them he was retiring. So people, you know, didn't know that. So
that was done. That was a done deal. So we can nail that one straight away.
That was a done deal, and the lads obviously tried to say you've still plenty in you, but he'd made his mind up. There was a lot of thing about players not coming back. The only players that aren't back are the two O'Donnells from Unions. So one is injured and one is in college. So the commute from Dublin to Donegal was taking his toll, and he just wanted to keep the head down and concentrate on his studies and possibly come back in the summer. So there was a lot of that stuff swirling that there was just simply not true. In terms of the whole process with the appointing the management, that was slow. That was too slow. And getting someone in there, we lost a lot of ground, and the way we went about it, like Paddy Carr and O'Rourke, they'd went in on separate tickets, and the both of them were combined, and there was a lot of talk about the reality of it is Kavanagh, Lacey, and McGuinness as an advisor, performance coach, or whatever you want to call it, we're going to get the job, in my opinion. So that fell through, and it went to the two lads, and they seem to be going well. They're working hard, and you know, you kind of watching from a distance now, and they're working hard, and they're trying to bring a change. People are talking about the style of play with Donegal. They're trying to bring a change now, and it's not going to work every weekend now. But I don't buy in transition. You look at Mayo. Mayo had a lot of new players. They transitioned, and they're still very, very competitive. So I don't buy it. We have plenty of quality up there. We don't need to go down and say, we're in transition. We'll come back at it again another year, or maybe even 2 years.
When you were playing football, when you were playing football for Donegal, before you were successful, when you were successful, when it slipped away a bit, and you're still very competitive, were there a lot of rumours around Donegal football? There
was. Jeannie Mackay, the party animals of the naughties, and then some of the stories you were hearing, and some of the stories family members were hearing. It was what actually happened and what they were actually hearing. It was like a Chinese whispers, and they were saying, "Did you actually do this, or were you involved in this?" And I'm saying, "No, well, we've got to tone it down here a wee bit." Went out for a few pints, maybe it might have been a Monday or a Tuesday, and that was it now. But it was, and I don't know is that in every county now, but there was a way of stories gathering a lot of pace in Donegal, and a lot of legs.
In Offaly in the 90s, Offaly had a brilliant hurling team in the 1990s who were, you would swear the way the stories went about them, that the lads were arriving into training with flagons of cider and sitting around the field drinking during training sessions. And it was like as if they never trained for a decade and just rambled up the Croke Park and hit a ball and won All Irelands. And during the period that they were really successful, they used to train in O'Connor Park in Tullamore at one end of the field, and we would train at the other with Tullamore footballers. And I know just how hard those boys trained. And there were a couple of lads who really enjoyed themselves around training, but most of the players weren't socializing. But the stories kind of gathered momentum from a few isolated incidents, and people just made up stuff as well.
I think there's a lot of stuff definitely in Donegal that people do make up, and I would imagine it's across the board in terms of the different counties, but it happens. It's a society.
Do you hear stories, Maurice? Do you hear stories that in your day job?
Yeah, you always do. Like I think Ireland's a very small country, so people will tend to talk. A lot of it, I think, is it's really poor form. Like, and I'm kind of curious. Like, James, to what extent did you nip the Kieran McDonald's nonsense last year in the bud because you just wanted to do exactly that? Or like, did it ever factor into your thoughts at all? For those who don't know what I'm talking about, there was an absolutely ridiculous story that Kieran McDonald left the backroom team. That I think that was actually published. I'm pretty sure it was after some soft talk for a couple of weeks. But the reason I bring that up, James, I was wondering, did it factor into your mind to come out and put that to bed at all, that might have some effect on the group? Because the stuff people talk, that goes on inevitably, but I think it's only a problem if it seeps in.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's like after the Tyrone defeat in 21, I think myself and Mac we went at it in the car park at 2:00 in the morning. We had I mean, it was serious, and we were listening to this or reading this the day after. Mac was in my house having a coffee. And he was literally nudging me. Do you see this? We had a roll out. Just absolute madness.
So somebody made that up, James. Somebody made that
completely and utterly. I wasn't even in a car park. I sat in a chair most of the night. It didn't move. So I would say outside the football conversations, I would say the majority of stuff is made up or on a whisper or on a wing and a prayer or whatever. Because, like, to go back to your question, Maurice, no, I didn't. Because if I started going out to kill that story, kill this story, kill the other story, kill it, I'd spend my life at it. So I took the, for the last 2 years, I pretty much said nothing to anyone or to any media. Now that they started stories based on that then or whatever, but. There's so many things that were untruths, I call them, or whatever. But unless you're in the camp, unless you're in one of the players or you're in that inner circle, how would people know? So it's sometimes intercounty setups are nearly mysterious, or they're doing this or they're doing that type of training or this, and it starts it starts from there. But I just going back to some of the things, like the amount of times that, geez, I was stopped in the street for, why didn't I play this fella or that fella or the other fella, or what's wrong with him, or the guys would be injured or they'd be away, or what you're doing to your man is awful. You haven't played him in 3 weeks and you've dropped him off the pan or whatever, but yet I've let him go away for 3 weeks because he needed a break, or do you know what I mean? There's so you could do things, and the next thing it just takes off, and you'd be absolutely amazed. Well, another good one you got me thinking there. I remember being in a taxi with Peter Canavan, Jim McGuinness, Senan Connell. This is when we were with Sky and someone else, and we were playing a five-a-side charity thing up in the Fina.
That's a poor enough team, James. You should have given the clubs a shout.
There was no pressing from them. I couldn't get on the press. You know what I mean? It was not. But I don't know if you remember. Was it the 2016 or 2017 final that David Brady was on? Jim McGuinness was down.
Oh yeah.
Training Mayo in Limerick or something. And
Is that where that came from?
McGuinness looking at me in the car. We're just looking at each other. What is David Brady doing? What is? So anyway, look, there's loads of that. A lot of it is harmless, but some of it can get, like anything, some of it can get twisted and can have an impact on maybe some players or their family or whatever. If it goes too far, but thankfully a lot of it doesn't. But yeah, interesting.
And in the rumor mill, though, Maurice, in the rumor mill, there's very few counties that Jim McGuinness hasn't trained at this stage, or hasn't been tapped up, or hasn't been to. It is kind of extraordinary the way stories gather momentum. I want to shift gear here a little bit, please. If Donegal or Dublin are going up to play Derry next Saturday at 5:00 in Derry, and Donegal or Derry are trying to build a team to win an All-Ireland. That's clearly the ambition there. I know there's stages and they're trying to get to Division 1. If they're to win the All-Ireland this year, I think they have to beat Dublin and lay down a marker of their intent next Saturday. Similarly, Dublin, between this great group of players that are still there, haven't won an All-Ireland for 2 years, trying to do what the Kerry team of the 80s did after their great run ended, missed 2 years, come back and win a 3 in a row. They're trying to introduce new players. I think if they cannot go and win in Derry, that they can't win the All-Ireland. Eamon, do you think that's fair?
Desi will know, walking into the car park in Celtic Park and getting the bus out, he'll know whether he's coming back the following year. Because if Derry beat Dublin, then Dublin are not going to win the All-Ireland. And I don't even think, they're not going to get into the semi or a final. It is big ramifications. They need a performance from them, and they need to make a statement this weekend now. So Derry, by beating Dublin, if they're talking about going to win an All-Ireland, if they beat Dublin, they're putting one of the contenders out of the race. And it's a strong thing to say, but that's my opinion. There's a lot riding on this weekend.
What do you do if a team is flat? Like, if you look at Dublin, they're comfortable against Limerick, okay against Kildare. You'd say that was a bit of rust, but got through it and were just about okay. Not brilliant, but did enough, and got over Clare. But really, like, I was talking to some Dublin supporters who were at the game on Saturday night and thought that Clare were exceptionally unlucky and got a few fairly hard decisions against them coming down the stretch, which cost them the game. So they're flat and they're stuck, it would seem. If you were in the Dublin camp at the moment, do you think it really doesn't matter? Or are you saying, because we'll be okay when the summer comes, or are you saying, lads, we have a problem?
I'd say there's no one in that Dublin dressing room saying it'll be okay in the summer. Their confidence is rattled for sure. Like, they're going up to Derry next weekend, and they're not sure themselves how they'll play or where they're at. And they're in Division 2. you know, how if they were in Division 1 at the moment, how would they be? How would they be doing? You know, I don't think they'd be doing great. Like the amount of goal shot, I can't believe their performances now compared to, you know, 2-3 years ago. And I know a lot's changed, whatever, but where Dublin were so strong and they're defensive and they're skilled and they're, you know that Keane O'Sullivan
everything
back and all that kind of stuff. Everything that they were really good at, it's changed. And you know, this idea of, you know, it's a fool's game in one way, that, you know, when Paul Mannion's back, when Howard is back, and this is back, when the other is back, and all the Jack McCaffrey's back, and it's all exciting and everything else, but expecting Jack and Paul to come back even anywhere close to the level that they were at, like they were and are brilliant players, but they're very different players. I would suggest. So I don't think Dublin know where they are. I think Desi's worried. I think Eamon is spot on what he was saying. You sort of know, you know from the training, you know from the players, you know what's going on. You know, so it's a huge game for Dublin against Derry, where they need to be really competitive, strong, confident, and win that game. And it's going to be a huge test for them, because, you know, based on the performance, like Clare, I sent Colin Collins a text today. I couldn't, you know, 6 points up with whatever left, and it just to
second week in a row. Second week
in a row. They're doing a lot of stuff right.
They could be pushing for promotion here.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of stuff right, Claire. They always do that. That's two that'll hurt, you know. So, but anyway, it's up to, let's see how that game. But that's a massive game for Dublin. Absolutely massive game that will have a huge bearing on how they enter into the championship.
Maurice, is there much talk about Dublin and how the senior football team is going? Is there noise coming out of the camp? I know previously it used to be really quiet. Do you hear anything?
No, nothing you'd pay any heed to anyway, either way, to be honest. I don't know.
No WhatsApp rumours, no?
Yes.
Is Dublin's problem going back to what we were talking about earlier, to what extent are we talking about attitude here, and to what extent are we talking about game plan? Go back to what we watched against Cork. Like, why? We talked about this at length after not kicking the ball out to Fenton in the middle, not using Con correctly, locked in what looks like football from 5 years ago, to be honest. I don't necessarily think, even if you were hearing stuff, you wouldn't pay much heed to it, because I don't see any evidence of that being the issue. But I definitely do think that's why I this is a crazy thing to say, and it could come back to bite me. In some ways, I think Tyrone are in a better place than Dublin, because if Tyrone will get it right, I can fully see, it is tangible, the headline that Tyrone were down. Did they spend the weekend in? They have spent last weekend in Mayo and Kilchmark. I think they did the same thing for the Galway game. You know, 2 hard training camps in Mayo. That was what brought it down. The same thing they did in Killarney. All these rooms are training around the national park. They got it right. You know, the chip on the shoulder, never say die attitudes, and they turned it around. But in terms of where Dublin are at now, you'd want to see some evidence that they're moving towards the top end of football, and we haven't seen that right now. So I think they're in some ways they're actually in a worse place, and that's why this game is so interesting. Like, how they set up against Derry will be absolutely fascinating. And if they aren't able to break them down, remember, like, Dublin were the team we credited Dublin in 2017. That was the death knell for the blanket defence. The way they methodically picked them apart. That Tyrone team now I'm talking about. That was it. If they aren't operating on the same level, you would seriously worry for them. So I agree, and I don't agree with Eamon in terms of if they saw a performance of that and they lost in a nail biter, I wouldn't be as concerned. Whereas if they ground out a result, but we didn't see any of that, then there are serious questions that you would be asking.
Yeah, it's one of the conundrums, because there are still a lot of good footballers there, but there seems to be a disconnect between generations, and the question marks still stand over the younger players as to whether they're clearly not at the same level as some of the absolute star players. So, Eamon, actually, who is the best Dublin footballer that you marked?
That I marked? The best Dublin footballer for me was James McCarthy. Now, but the best one that I marked, I think I did a spell on Mannion for about 5 minutes.
You think it was Mannion, right?
I was going that fast. Now is normally only a man for the big heavy boys and the full forward. But no, McCarthy was the best footballer.
Why do you say that?
Just that, first of all, he's a brilliant footballer, but in terms of the edge he brought, the aggressiveness, and when Dublin needed someone, he was driving forward. And if I always says if I had to pick, 3 players to take with me, I'd take McManus, Keegan, and McCarthy up to Donegal if we could. If we get a house for them there in Kildare somewhere, we'd set them up, no bother.
You take Kieran McManus, would you? Yeah.
Connor McManus.
McManus, sorry.
Yeah, Connor McManus. Just a still a wee bit of Kildare and made this that old school that it's them boys that have the edge. There's obviously better flair players, or there could be better flair players, but 3 of them they have the edge, and you could give it to any of them boys, and they would respond, and they always showed up on the big day.
James, just while we're on that point for a second, who do you think was the best player in that Dublin team?
Oh my gosh, or you could say 10 players, and you wouldn't be far wrong. Who would I go with? Look, you have obviously Jeremy Connolly, and you have Flair, and you have all that kind of stuff. Keane O'Sullivan, I just thought was just he just held the whole thing together. And Rory O'Callaghan, actually, you could go back, but I'd say, thinking over the whole lot, I think Colin O'Callaghan at his peak is an absolute phenomenon. I think he can be the heartbeat of the team. He's dangerous. He's score. He's brave. He's good in the air. I just think, and hopefully he gets back to where he can go. But I think Colin O'Callaghan was massive. But look, you're talking about 7 or 8 of the best players probably in the last 50 years that were playing on that team. So
you're playing. You've 1 match left to coach, and you have a space in your team, and you have the pick of the country, and you're looking for one last forward position. Are you picking Con, or are you picking David Clifford?
This is like a game we play in the pub, If there's a
game
of football, like what?
No, I'm asking you. This is it. Like if we're talking about absolutely premium inside forwards, who do you want?
Eamon, are you going first on that one? Yeah.
Eamon, which would you?
Are you trying to get out of Dodge there, James? Flying time. I would go with Clifford. I think what we've seen with Clifford so far is just it's off the charts there.
Would you have liked to mark him, Eamon? Would you like to have a hop off him?
The ego in me says, yeah, I want to mark him. I would love to have had a wee go at him. But realistically, I've marked players before that would have been, a few levels below Clifford, and they've took me to the cleaners. So the ego says yes, but the logical part of me says no. It's glad to be away from that.
Yeah, James, I'm going to let you think about that, because we're going to answer that later in the. We'll answer that later in the summer, maybe, when it comes down to it, and it gets and it gets tight, because it is one of those things that everybody says Dublin would have beaten Kerry if Con had played last summer, and or at least a lot of people I know say that. I don't think I'm not too sure I line up on that argument, but I'm sure it's a story we will come back to later in the year. If you look down through the divisions, the presumption was a few weeks ago from a lot of people that Monaghan were in a lot of bother, and that Monaghan and Donegal were most likely to be relegated, that they were the 2 prime candidates for it. Is that the way you saw it, Eamon? I
think Roscommon would have been in that conversation too.
Yeah, they would too, to be fair. Yeah, they would.
Us Donegal, when we were sizing up, we knew we probably weren't going to be up at the top of the leagues, and we says, it'll probably be Monaghan or Roscommon. And Tyrone were actually in the conversation, and when I chatted to a few J people up here in terms of what Tyrone are going to show up this year, they seemed to have, there was a lot of good word coming from the Tyrone camp, and they seemed to show, they had a tough. I don't know what happened to them in the meantime now, but it would have been Roscommon and Monaghan, and obviously from outside Donegal would have been in the conversation. I thought we might have had a wee bit enough quality to stay up now, but Yeah, Roscommon was in the conversation, and
they seem clear. But what is it that Monaghan have that allows them to come back year after year and be in the hunt? I don't think they're safe yet, by the way, either by a long shot. But what is it about them that is so impressive? I haven't played against them.
You know, when I look at Monaghan and you ask me what is it that typifies Monaghan, and you know, someone like Darren Hughes, you know, Darren's not overly blessed with skill, and he'll probably text me now if he ever hears me, if he listens to this podcast now. But you know, he just gets himself about. He brings energy. He's on 34, 35 now. You know, he's so important in the last few games. He's been so important to Monaghan, and just that attitude. And we'll go back to the Conor McManus. Conor came on against us 2 weeks ago, last week, and he had an impact on the game. He won a few marks to kind of bring that tide with Monaghan, and you know, the floodgates opened against us. So it's just that grittiness, and you know, they've good footballers, and Monaghan for me are just a good team. I've always respected them, even though like we've had our battles, but I've always respected Monaghan. Yeah,
is there a bit of an edge between Donegal and Monaghan?
Not as much as if you ask me. Tyrone was the edge. Tyrone was Did
that get nasty?
It started to get nasty. Tyrone started to get nasty, and you know, I think it was 2013, 15, and 16. We played each other in the first round in the Ulster, and there's times it spilled over, but there wasn't that same toxic. And I don't know if toxic the right word now, but there wasn't the same level of the sledging, the wee bite that was in it. Obviously, we went at each other 100%, and we're. You know,
were you sledged on the pitch when you played Tyrone?
Was I sledged? Oh, of course I wasn't. And I gave plenty of sledging too before. I kind of say poor me now. But no, I would have been surely now. Definitely.
Anyone say anything tasty to you?
No, not really. Now there was obviously the silly stuff now that was across the board about drinking and the party animal side of it now. But 95% of the time it was
the right side of the line.
Silly stuff now, and I would have been saying the same silly stuff back. But that was the Tyrone and the Monaghan crack.
What do you think, James, of Monaghan? Why do you think they're able to? Well, how did they get to Division 1, and why are they so good at staying there? Why are they so competitive?
I think they've good players. You know, they've sprinkled in the good players. You know, you saw that yesterday. You know, Eamon mentioned Darren Hughes there. You know, the defiance at the end when he caught that ball and drove out. You know, it was a rallying. You know, and I'd say that I don't know. I'd say there's a real honesty about him. And there's a lot of guys like that on that team. You know, that they're Ryan Wiley and some of these guys and Shane Carey. They're solid, hard, honest type of guys. And look, the guys mentioned Conor McManus earlier on. You know, he came on the last day. Like, don't ever forget how brilliant a player he
outstanding.
He was. He like for me, he was definitely the most accurate player, I think, of the last 10 with both feet.
Really, would you put him? Would you put him that high?
I'd love to. I don't know if Morris. There's a job for you. That's one. Work out Conor McManus's return stats from the last 10 years or something versus I don't know, David Clifford now or something. It'd be. I think he's phenomenally accurate and was a brilliant player. And when a team of guys have a player like that, and then you have a good work rate, and then Maliki there with him, who's obviously a brilliant manager. So when you put all that together, you know, they turn up every day. You know, certainly in Ulster, and you know, there's the making of a really, really good team.
James, can I road test a theory on Monaghan with you that I'm not convinced of myself, but like, I have to be careful how I phrase this now. Is the Great Survivors a good thing? Like, is it actually?
Yeah.
Right. Say, for example, right, every single year, we do this every year. We add up the players that play in the league. It's the easiest exercise. You just, you know, how many the squad players was used by every single panel. We're doing it donkey's years. You do this, especially under Banty, every single year. Like some squads, you'll be up 30, 35. Banty, 23, 22, like a really the same guys again and again coming and keeping them going, which is fine, but they don't kick on from the 2-0 that they won 8 years ago. Now you look at, this is just a fun, I'm not convinced of this, as I should stress, but you go back to, they bet Dublin in 2022 in the last day of the league. Who was playing for Dublin that day? Robbie McDade, Tom Lahiff, Lorcan O'Dell. Was Michael Shields in goals? I'm pretty sure he was. Whatever about Desi, you could not accuse him of not throwing open the door. Like, he found out about his squad that year. Now, they were relegated, but they ended up in an All-Ireland semi-final. Go back a year previous, 2021, they relegated Galway. That Galway team sitting up in the stand, I can remember it. It went to extra time. Gary O'Donnell sitting up in the stand, a captain of Galway when Joyce came in 2020. Johnny Dewan sitting up in the stand. Sean Andy O'Cally, who was a stalwart of that Galway team. That was Colin Sweeney's second ever game, I think, for Galway. He came on, kicked the point. Matthew Tierney, his fourth ever competitive game. Dylan McHugh, the year before that, Dylan McHugh came on as a sub in an All-Ireland club final, and he played 4 games in the league. But I'll tell you one thing, Dylan McHugh was a stalwart for Galway last year. Like, they found, in some ways, it served Galway better. It nearly served Dublin better to get relegated and come back up and throw open the door rather than picking the same old faces. I'll tell you, actually, the reason I bring this up and asking you, James, is because 2021, you got relegated. You don't need reminding of that, but you got relegated, played Down in Castlebar the first day out that year. And a guy made his debut that game against Down. It might have been a bit of talk on this week. That was Enda Hession, his first game in Division 2, open round of a league game that year. And now look at how he has benefited from that exposure. So I do wonder, you're looking in the stand, you see all these Galway legends, and who's sitting on the other side in the Monaghan stand that day? Gary Mohan. Gary Mohan makes one mistake. Look, it was a bad mistake. It could have led to a goal at the weekend, and he's pulled 40 minutes in. He's playing midfield. They don't know where they're going to play him, and he's pulled. He's taken off. So who bails Monaghan out at the end? As you mentioned, Hughes makes that catch. McCannis comes on. Ryan Wiley was on. But Desi Ward had a phenomenal game again. But the same guys again. Like, this is the same Monaghan team. And part of me wonders, would Monaghan actually be better off going down? Now, you can tell me that's nonsense if you think it is.
No, I'd say sort of like Division 1. And again, Eamon will know that is an absolute dogfight, day in, day out. And, before the Sigerson break, the first 2 games, we've sort of talked about this before, first 2 games, if you don't have any points on the board after the first 2 games, you sort of lock it down a little bit and try and make sure you get something out of the next 2 games to 3 points out of the next 2 games or whatever, to try. And so you probably revert again. You revert maybe a little bit to the players that to that. So I suppose what it does do is sometimes it can be very hard in Division 1, depending on how things go, to develop a new game plan or to evolve your game plan or to try something different or to do whatever. And if, say, you get relegated, you go down to Division 2, which is the case with us, when you go down there, you'd have a very good idea what you're capable of against some of the opposition. So you can absolutely try something that you probably wouldn't try in Division 1. And I'm probably exaggerating that a little bit, Maurice, but I think your point is, I think the point's valid. And that's something you go down there if you utilize it right. But then there's the whole thing, like, can you win? Like, you can pick up within a season, you can pick up bad habits in Division 2 if you're a seasoned Division 1 team by maybe, holding on to the ball a little bit longer than you typically do. You might get away with sloppy hand passing that you wouldn't in Division 1. So, you definitely develop or evolve things in Division 2, but then when it comes to championship time, you mightn't be as sharp as you would be playing through Division 1.
And I think I would come in there, and that I think the longer you're about Division 1, if you want to be in the top table, the semi-finals, finals, the longer you're in Division 1, the better chance it gives you to get to that stage. That would be my opinion on it anyway.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
The nature of the results this year, if we go, Division 1 is still up for grabs as to who can be relegated. I think Galway are still in bother, Tyrone are in bother, Monaghan and Donegal still in bother. Maybe Armagh just not absolutely clear of the hunt yet either. Division 2, Limerick looked doomed after the weekend again, but Louth Kildare is massive at the weekend. So is Clare Cork. Those 2 games, whoever wins both of those games is probably not going to be in good enough shape. And I do think it does look more and more like Dublin and Derry promoted from Division 2. I think that's the most likely thing to happen in all the Division 3. Cavan are a sight ahead of everybody else in Division 3. I think Down beating Westmeath at the weekend was a great step for Down, and Fermanagh and Down are probably the two teams in the box seat for the next promotion place. And down at the bottom, Longford drawing with Tipperary was a bit of a disaster for both counties, leaving them both on a point. And that means they still need 2 more wins, most likely, to survive. And that leaves the two of them in a lot of trouble. And then in Division 4, it's true, like Leitrim came back, Sligo came back this weekend, but Wicklow beating Laois was a shock. And Laois looked like that they were the form team in that division. And now they're back in a really serious dogfight and have to go to Leitrim in a couple of weeks' time, and will most likely have to win that match if they're there to do it. At this point of the season, James, how do you focus? Do you go? Is it always simply the next game, or are you thinking 2 or 3 games ahead?
That's an interesting question. Again, it depends. It depends where you are, and it depends on so many. You know, if you're probably very few are fully safe at the moment in some of those divisions. But you know, so everyone at this stage, it needs to get their next game right. You know, so it's still about the next game. And making sure you're right for that. You want to win that and put out all doubt. So then you can truly decide for the last 2 rounds how you want to use those 2 rounds. Is there a couple of players that mightn't be full fitness yet that you think, you know, haven't played much, that might offer you something for the summer? Are they worth, you know, giving 2 games to, you know, regardless of how they play almost, you know, seeing can they develop through that? So there's different scenarios that you can look at depending on where you are in the league. If you're looking up and you're okay, then you have a different number of things you can do. But if you're worried about going down, then it's a different scenario.
And Eamon, as a player, does it come to the point at this stage of the season where at any stage of the season where you're actually thinking about your own position in a team?
Yes, but I'll add in there that the season where, like, I had different milestones in terms of every season, but that's totally gone now. In terms of all them milestones will be different with the condensed. I never panicked during the league. First 2 games, you would have been blown hard. You might have got cleaned out of it. There was always that wee 6-week block until Ulster Championship. That's when you solidified your spot. But it's so different now. If someone loses their spot in the league, if you're a player, and it's very hard to get back.
The season could be over for you almost.
This is it. You know, you don't have that luxury, and that's what I was saying. The condensed season has nearly saved the preseason competitions, where everybody was saying we've got to get rid of them now because no one takes them seriously. They actually give you a chance now to get into good shape, to get your momentum going for the league, so you can get the touches on the ball. Whether before this, I would have viewed them as just, you know, a waste of time. Give them to the bucks that are just into the squad, the young lads and all this, and they didn't have that attraction. But now they do in terms of the preparation of the season. So it's just total. It's a new lay of the land, and it's just something I wouldn't be overly familiar with as a player.
If you must surely though have been in the dressing room as well, 3 or 4 rounds into the league, and you know that you're not going to win an Ulster Championship this year, or you know you're not going to win, you're not going to be competitive for the All-Ireland. What's that like?
I generally, and I don't know if, I'm sure you can relate to this, but I generally, and I don't know where this comes from, because I would like to say I'm smart enough, but there was times, it didn't matter how bad the league went or what the preparation was like, there was a part of me thinking, you know, that this could be our year. This could be our year. And it's nearly torturing yourself that you have this wee belief in you that
you hold on to something.
You're going to do it. I remember being in London for a few months, and Cass was on the phone, says, you know, things are going well. and I was chatting to a few of the boys, and things weren't going well at all. The setup wasn't great, and training was dead. But there was still a part of me, if they won it this year, I'll be sick. So like an idiot, I came home. But just on it now, I would say we're very close to wrapping up now. I just want to have James here. It's interestingly watching Donegal yesterday, where they just had scored the goal. There was a good bit of distance between them. They set up for the kick out. Now they set up poorly for their kick out.
This is against Galway. Yeah,
this is against Galway, and off the kick out, they conceded a goal straight away. So if they had managed to keep that distance right throughout for the first half, I think Donegal go on to win that game. And there's just talk now that you see teams conceding the kick out, and Mayo in their day would have been as good a team, probably the best team going at pressing kickouts. And I'm just wondering what James's opinion on, is there a case where you can say drop off and give the team the kick out? Because I think if Donegal had done that, Galway don't get that goal, and Donegal
and the door shut. The door shut on, yeah.
So it was just when I heard James was on, I'm going to ask him this question.
Yeah, there is, and we sort of talked about this 2 weeks ago. There, again, different teams set up different ways depending on the players out. But in a situation like that, if you want to make sure, because you can be vulnerable after scoring, etc., etc., etc. Do you want to sort of go nearly a halfway house and lock it up at the back? Give them the kick out. Give them the kick out short and right to that fella that you want them to get it. Do you know what I mean? So they get that, then they have to go through, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5 to get there. So that's definitely an option. To do that. Yeah, because Matthew Tiernan's goal, right? Just waltzing through, absolute knife to the heart, wasn't it?
Because Donegal were poor pressing all day. Their kick out press there's a lot of work to do in it. So I'm just wondering, should the shout one out and just drop to that, whatever it be, the halfway or wherever they were.
Well, that's the interesting point, and you my philosophy would always be, if you analyze the opposition and you set up right, you can absolutely put serious pressure on them and still be solid. You can get to if you force it long, you can get set up defensively strong as well, or around the break zone. But if you're saying Donegal weren't pressing well during the game, I don't know whether that's they're not committed to it, or they don't believe it, or they're not quick enough to get into the shape, or whatever it is. But if that's the case, then that'd be different. You'd nearly expect a player maybe to call that, right, guys, just go in. Let's lock it a little bit, or whatever. You'd have 2 or 3 situations depending on whatever, but. There's nothing like really pressing strong, in my opinion, to dominate a team. But depending on how that pressing's going, then or where the game is at, you need to have the flexibility to adapt.
I mean, Galway went long, extreme. If you go long, mid, short, Galway went long as in past 65 yesterday with 5 kickouts, and they only won 1. That was the only one that Paul Conroy catches. It turns into Jared Avern, Tierney coming off the shoulder. But every single other one, McGee, Langan, swept up, went up. They actually should have, just before half time, they had them penned in. Galway were going long, they could knock it out. And Langan had a really good shot on the right, he put it wide. O'Donnell had one on the other side, he put it wide. But that was their window there. If those 3 chances went over, they're going in at the break 6 up, and you're saying they've destroyed Gleason's kick out here. It's the gamble. You get it right 4 times. That one time it goes wrong, Conroy comes a mark. Isn't McMiniman standing in front of him, gets pinged, it got brought forward, ball into Devon, and that's it. But I thought of Galway, I think Galway had 30 attacks, only half of them did they manage to even get a shot off. And that goes back to what James's point. If you're going short constantly, the amount of players you have to work through to even just get an attack. I think that's why Galway only got 10 scores yesterday. So I thought Donegal did really well in it. I thought they set up well, but it was just the why the kill.
It's good to have someone that actually knows a bit about the game on. You've just contradicted my whole point there, Marcel.
but I think Eamon's point though is as well the timing of it.
Exactly.
So you've just got the goal and you just want to solidify for a few minutes, and then maybe you just kind of go, okay, we'll sit on this one. Eamon, thanks very much for for joining. It's been a pleasure to
Cheers, lads.
have you. Thank you to Larry Ryan for running the podcast, to Raf Rocca, to Jack Neville, to Tony Lean, to everyone at Examiner Sport. Thanks to Allianz for their support. A huge thanks to James, to Eamon, as I say, and to Maurice Brosnan for joining us today. Béimi Charnash Galua.
Remember that, lad. There's a small bit of a needle there. Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen to Sweden, and now they're really rolling.